What do a nomadic herdsman, a frustrated art student, and a self-crowned emperor have in common? They didn't just crave power. They rewrote the rules of civilization with fire, steel, and ambition. From the wind-swept steppes of Mongolia to the burning streets of Berlin, from enlightened kings to monsters in uniform, these 7 men didn't inherit the world, they took it. So today, we're diving headfirst into the minds of the most ruthless conquerors in history. But before we sharpen our swords, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single moment of chaos, empire, and legacy. Which of these titans do you think changed history the most? And at what cost? Let us know in the comments. All right, strategists, it's time to march. Genghis Khan, the storm of the steppes. Before the world knew his name, he was just a boy, abandoned, starving, and invisible. His name was Temujin. Born into the brutal Mongolian steppes, he was rejected by his tribe, left to wander with his mother and siblings, scraping by on roots and rodents. He had no title, no allies, and no future. But what he did have was rage. A silent, burning fury that would one day swallow continents whole. Temujin didn't inherit power. He carved it out of blood and betrayal. His rise was a masterclass in survival, building trust, then breaking enemies. Tribe by tribe, horse by horse, he turned a scattered people into a single war machine. He didn't just unite Mongolia, he weaponized it. And with that, Genghis Khan was born, not a name, but a force of nature. The wind on the steppes began to whisper stories. Stories of unstoppable cavalry, of cities turned to ash, of skulls piled into mountains. His empire would stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the gates of Europe, an area larger than any ever ruled by a single man. But Genghis wasn't just a destroyer, he was a paradox. The same man who slaughtered millions also established the safest trade routes of the ancient world, the Silk Road, and created laws to protect religious freedom. His military genius was unmatched. He used psychological warfare, misinformation, spies, and overwhelming speed. He knew when to strike, and more importantly, when to terrify. Cities often surrendered without a fight because they had heard what happened to those who didn't. The message was clear: submit nor vanish, and vanish they did. But there was also structure within the storm. His empire operated on merit, not birthright. Illiterate tribesmen became generals. Former enemies became trusted advisors. Genghis didn't care where you came from, only that you could follow orders and win. When he died, his followers made sure no one could find his grave. Legend says his funeral escort killed anyone who crossed their path, then took their own lives. The man who conquered half the known world disappeared into myth, just as he had emerged from obscurity. But his story leaves us with a haunting question. What happens when one man becomes more feared than death itself? Alexander the Great, the eternal dream of Hellas. He burned Thebes to the ground, not out of cruelty, but as a message. The boy king of Macedonia was no longer a student of philosophy. He was war incarnate. Alexander wasn't born into conquest. He was forged in it. His childhood was a furnace of discipline, ambition, and impossible expectations. His mother told him he was the son of Zeus. His tutor Aristotle taught him that the world was his to shape. And his father, King Philip II, left him a weapon, a united and battle-hardened Macedonian army. At 20, Alexander took the throne. By 30, he ruled the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen. But for Alexander, victory was never enough. He didn't just want to win, he wanted to unify. His campaign against the Persian Empire was not a simple war, it was a vision. At Granicus, Issus, and Gaugamela, he annihilated numerically superior forces through sheer brilliance. His tactics were improvisations of genius. His men followed him not out of duty, but because they believed he was destiny in human form. He crossed deserts, scaled mountains, and charged into battle at the front lines. He fought like a common soldier, but thought like a god. Wherever he went, he founded cities, Alexandrias, each a monument to the fusion of East and West. He didn't just conquer, he blended. In Egypt, they hailed him as a pharaoh. In Persia, he wore their clothes and married their princesses. He dreamed of a new world order, one civilization, one people, one culture. But the higher he climbed, the more unstable he became. Paranoia crept in. Friends were executed. Generals whispered. His troops, once loyal, grew exhausted and resentful. In India, they refused to march farther. The dream began to crack, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, it ended. In Babylon, at the height of his power, Alexander fell ill. Fever consumed him. Within days, the man who had never lost a battle lost his life. He was just 32, no heir, no plan, just a shattered empire and a legend too large to bury. Some say he was poisoned, others that his body couldn't keep up with his ambition. But all agree on one thing: the world has never seen another Alexander. Tamerlane, the architect of ruin. He walked with a limp, but the world would kneel before him. His enemies mocked him as Timur the Lame. History would remember him as Tamerlane, the butcher poet, the one who turned entire cities into graveyards and called it strategy. More than a century after Genghis Khan's death, a new storm gathered over Central Asia. Timur claimed no royal blood, but he didn't need it. He claimed legacy through fire. From the turquoise domes of Samarkand, he unleashed a campaign not to build an empire, but to burn the world and sign his name in ash. He said he was restoring the Mongol Empire. In truth, he was building his own mythology, one battle, one massacre at a time. Tamerlane's army swept across Iran, Iraq, Syria, India, and Russia. He didn't conquer to govern, he conquered to dominate. Entire populations were wiped out. In Delhi, tens of thousands were slaughtered in a matter of days. In Baghdad, he built towers from severed heads, grim monuments to fear. In Damascus, he promised peace, then burned it to the ground. Diplomacy, to Tamerlane, was nothing more than theater, a soft curtain before the blades fell. And yet the same man who turned cities into ruins was obsessed with beauty. He adored poetry, mathematics, architecture. He filled Samarkand with scholars and artists. He built madrasas, mosques, and palaces so stunning they defied the horror he unleashed elsewhere. He was a paradox, a patron of the arts and a demon of war. He was not trying to rule the future, he was trying to haunt it. Tamerlane wanted fear to echo through the centuries, louder than any praise, and in many ways it did. His empire was short-lived. It crumbled soon after his death. But the scars he left on the world were deep, and they remain etched in the memory of every place he touched. As he planned his final campaign against the Ming dynasty of China, he died. Alone, surrounded by maps soaked in ambition, he never reached his final destination. And so we ask, what do you call a man who builds nothing, but wants the world to remember his destruction? Cyrus the Great, the king who listened, while others conquered to enslave, he conquered to free. In a world where empires rose on the bones of the defeated, Cyrus the Great built something unheard of, a realm of tolerance, unity, and vision. Born in the heart of ancient Persia, Cyrus was raised to rule. But unlike other monarchs, he was taught not just to command, but to listen. Where most saw enemies, he saw people. Where others imposed, he invited. His empire would not be a cage, it would be a mosaic. His first act of greatness came when he overthrew the Median Empire, not to destroy it, but to unite it with his own people. He offered the defeated a place in his vision, not under his heel, and they accepted. Then came Babylon. The city that had withstood armies for centuries opened its gates to Cyrus without a fight. He didn't sack it, he didn't burn it. He walked in like a liberator, The priests, the people, even the conquered, welcomed him. Why? Because he promised something no conqueror before him had offered: respect. He allowed exiled peoples to return home. He restored temples. He protected local religions. One document carved in clay would immortalize his values: the Cyrus cylinder. It is considered by many the first declaration of human rights in recorded history. And yet, make no mistake, Cyrus was not naive. He was a master strategist. His army was disciplined, diverse, and efficient. He absorbed cultures, not just territories. He didn't just grow an empire, he elevated it. At its peak, the Achaemenid Empire stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the Indus River, encompassing over 20 different cultures and languages. It was the first true multicultural empire, centuries ahead of its time. Cyrus died in battle, facing a nomadic tribe far from his golden capital. His tomb, simple and unadorned, still stands today, a quiet monument to a man who chose humility over hubris. He remains one of the few conquerors in history remembered with affection by those he conquered. So ask yourself, can true power come not from fear, but from dignity? Attila the Hun, the scourge of God. They said that where he passed, grass would never grow again. His name was Attila, and to the crumbling Roman Empire, he was not just an enemy, he was an omen. Attila did not rule from marble palaces. He came from the steppes, wild, wind-blown lands where survival meant strength and weakness meant death. The Huns were nomads, fast as the wind and ruthless as wolves. But under Attila, they became something far more dangerous, a hammer aimed at the heart of Europe. He united the Hun tribes with sheer force of will, forging a war machine of horsemen and terror. His demands were simple: gold, obedience, or annihilation. When diplomacy failed, his riders thundered across borders like a storm, unstoppable, unpredictable, and merciless. He crushed cities, extorted emperors, and mocked the might of Rome with every gallop. His tactics weren't just violent, they were psychological. Tribes and towns surrendered at the whisper of his name, hoping to avoid the fate of those who resisted: slaughtered populations, smoldering ruins, and bodies left as warnings. In 451, he met his first real resistance. On the fields of the Catalonian plains, a coalition of Romans and Visigoths halted his advance. The battle was apocalyptic. The dead littered the earth. Though not a defeat, it was a pause, a crack in Attila's invincibility. But he wasn't finished. The next year, he marched toward Rome itself, and then something no one expected happened. At the gates of the Eternal City, a single man came to meet him: Pope Leo I. No army, no weapons, just words. What they said remains a mystery. But whatever it was, it worked. Attila turned back. Was it diplomacy? Was it a bribe, a vision, divine intervention? No one knows. But the terror receded, if only briefly. A year later, Attila died on his wedding night. Some say it was a nosebleed, others whisper of poison. Either way, the beast was gone. Without him, the Hun Empire shattered, but the legend remained. And to this day, his name still echoes in the darkest corners of Europe. Because sometimes, history doesn't remember kings. It remembers nightmares. Adolf Hitler, the conqueror of horror. He didn't raise armies on horseback or storm ancient walls with swords. He conquered with microphones, flags, and fear. Adolf Hitler, the name that would become synonymous with evil, didn't seek an empire of nations. He sought an empire of annihilation. Before he ignited the world, Hitler was a failed artist, drifting through Vienna and Munich with resentment as his only fuel. Rejected by art schools, broken by poverty, and wounded in World War I, he returned home not as a hero, but as a vessel of rage. Germany was humiliated, its economy shattered, its people desperate, and in that despair, Hitler rose, not with violence at first, but with words, blistering, seductive, poisonous words. He offered scapegoats. He promised rebirth, and a nation listened. Through manipulation and terror, he took power, legally. Then he dismantled the system that gave it to him. Overnight, a republic became a dictatorship, and the world stood by, unsure of what it was witnessing. His vision was monstrous, a racially pure Germany, expanded by conquest, cleansed by genocide. It began with propaganda, then laws, then violence, then war. Poland fell in weeks. France soon after, Norway, the Netherlands, Yugoslavia, Greece. The blitzkrieg moved like lightning. But Hitler's ambition didn't stop at borders. Behind the front lines, something far darker unfolded: the Holocaust. 6 million Jews, millions of others, executed not for what they did, but for who they were. It wasn't just war, it was industrialized extermination. And yet, as he expanded, he overreached. He challenged the Soviet Union, launching Operation Barbarossa. But like Napoleon before him, he found his empire frozen in the snows of Russia. Supply lines collapsed, troops starved, resistance grew. By 1945, Germany was in ruins, cities burned, armies defeated. The dream had become a nightmare. And in a cold, dim bunker beneath the crumbling capital, Hitler faced the world he had made and took his own life. 10 years of conquest, 50 million dead. One name forever cursed. He didn't want to be remembered. He wanted to be obeyed. But history gave him a different legacy, a warning. Napoleon Bonaparte, the titan who challenged Europe. He was born on a forgotten island, Corsica, without title, wealth, or noble blood. But he dreamed like an emperor, and eventually he crowned himself as one. Napoleon Bonaparte rose not by inheritance, but by merit. In a France torn apart by revolution, chaos, and bloodshed, he emerged as a brilliant military mind. At 24, he was commanding armies. At 35, he ruled half of Europe. His genius was unmatched. In Italy, he turned ragtag troops into a force of legend. In Egypt, he lost the war, but won the myth. Every battlefield was a stage, every maneuver a masterpiece. But his greatest conquest was political, rising from general to first consul to emperor of the French. He didn't wait for the Pope to crown him. He placed the crown on his own head, declaring that destiny answered to him, not to God. Napoleon rewrote France, literally. His legal code still influences laws today. He built schools, banks, roads. He restored order but demanded control. Then he set his sights on Europe. Austria, Prussia, Spain, Italy. The map bent to his will. His greatest triumph came at Austerlitz, where he crushed 2 empires in a single day. But like all who soar too high, he began to fall. Russia became his graveyard. In 1812, he led 600,000 men into the Russian winter. Less than 10% returned. The cold, the starvation, the guerrilla attacks. He couldn't outsmart nature. Enemies smelled blood. Coalitions formed. His empire cracked. Exiled to the tiny island of Elba, he waited. Then he escaped. In one of history's boldest returns, he marched back to France, alone. Soldiers sent to arrest him bowed instead. For 100 days, he ruled again. Then came Waterloo. It wasn't just a defeat, it was an exclamation mark. Napoleon was exiled again, this time to St. Helena, a remote rock in the South Atlantic. There, surrounded by ocean and memories, he died. No crown, no army, just silence. Was he a tyrant or a hero? A liberator or a dictator? The world still debates. But one truth remains. Napoleon didn't just change Europe, he changed how the world thinks about power. 7 men, 7 paths, one obsession: to conquer. Some carved empires with steel, others with fear, a few with ideas. All of them left footprints too large to erase, on maps, in memories, and in the scars of history. Genghis Khan turned nomads into a storm that swallowed continents. Alexander dreamed of unity and died chasing it. Tamerlane destroyed more than he built, just to be remembered. Cyrus proved that compassion can conquer where cruelty fails. Attila was chaos incarnate, here to remind civilizations they were never safe. Hitler took hatred and turned it into machinery. Napoleon remade a continent only to lose it in a frozen field. Each of them rose as a man. Each of them became myth. Some are honored, others reviled, but none are forgotten. Because conquest isn't just about borders and battles. It's about reshaping the world in your image and forcing the future to remember your name. But there's a truth that even the greatest conquerors couldn't escape. The higher you rise, the harder you fall. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video and you're passionate about this kind of content, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming videos and discover more fascinating stories. See you in the next video.